A reality machine is a machine that produces reality. And I think that suggests that reality is not something which is out there in which you can walk into. But reality is something that is actually constantly happening, or something that is in fact being produced. Well, some machines, they seem to suggest that reality is not just produced, but it also has the ability to sort of reevaluate itself in the process of its own production. So this means it's a kind of reality that seems to both create, let's say, a sense of reality, but it also evaluates, well, what is then really real? So when I call the show Reality Machines, it's really also indirectly the question, well, what does real actually mean? Is what we see real? Or is it in fact something that the brain has organized for us so that it makes sense? And therefore, did we not have a brain, would it have been different? So we know that reality is in fact relative to the eyes that sees it, relative to the context, the culture, the time in which it takes place. And as such, reality can actually change, or it can actually move. It can go from, one situation to another. Reality is not something static, and you might in fact be the reality machine yourself. So now I have a studio here in Berlin in which we're sitting now, and I'm very fortunate to have 80 or 90 people working here. The studio grew over 20 some years, 22 years maybe.
So here we go. This is a space we do for bigger tests. Part of your body of work, the piece that's going to be in Stockholm, was hanging down here. This is then a prototype for the wall.
I think it is much more inspiring for me to be working within an environment with a lot of people. See, now of course I would like to think that I am, in charge of where an idea is born and how the direction of the idea goes and how it is concluded. But I also want to suggest that the studio as such has a certain life of its own. It's a very, very interesting atmosphere because we are not submitted to the traditional sort of production efficiency regime.
It's an ongoing project that Olafur has been working with. Typical for Olafur, then he finds a medium or a thing that he finds interesting, and then he explores it for as long as he still finds potential there. It's of course an important part of the studio. We meet here every day, we eat here together and exchange, what we're working on because it's such a big house. We're at the architect's corner, and as Olafur explained, there's no sort of clear-cut division between architecture and art. It's very much one.
Whether I call it a work of art or not is not so important for the experience of it. But everything I do, I would like to suggest, has an artistic dimension. This is why I say, well, the architecture or the space division is also an artistic tone or a voice. And we're also very conscious about you don't come into the studio to get away from the world outside. Sometimes one might find comfort in that idea because the world outside can just be so, well, hideous. But the truth is, the idea of the studio is you step into the studio and you get a sense of being closer to the world outside. You have an amplified version of the... It's like a microscope. You can see everything with greater sort of finesse. a museum is not a place you go for escapistic reasons. You don't go to a museum to disconnect. You actually go to sort of reevaluate, why in the first place are things like they are. And that does not have to be, easily and pragmatically or didactically or pedagogically explained to you, but just like in an emotional way, your relationship with something abstract, right? There is no room for abstract thinking or abstract ideas in the sort of efficiency-driven society we are in, right? So an artist studio and a cultural institution, I would argue, is a place where you gain confidence with the very odd temporal notion of something abstract. You just go and spend time with something that is not so easily verbalized.